A couple of you were having trouble even after the last tutorial on getting started with Lab 3. And of course, I want you to just have fun on this. So I thought maybe we'd talk a little bit about some of the different pieces and some of the syntax that may be a little bit unfamiliar to you. So this syntax is one of the newer pieces of the C++ standard. We can just describe what's going on here. We're going to say we can now have an automatic variable, and we're going to name it C here, which is just one of the things in this token. Okay, so the token is a string, so each piece of the token is a character. So this is going to actually be a character that is one of the characters in this string. And then we'll be able to say if this character is an alphanumeric, then we know what to do with it. Okay? So that's kind of the first piece of kind of an interesting syntax. Turns out we're also going to be using a iterator to iterate over this vector, or this set in this particular case. You should notice that the syntax for iterating over a set is the same as the syntax for iterating over a vector or a map, and so iterators are just really cool, and so we're excited to kind of give you an introduction to some of this new syntax. So anyway, this if we look at iterating over a set, we're going to say, okay, let's just start at the beginning of the set, and then stopping when we're at the end of the set. And then this turns out, when you say a variable plus plus or plus plus the variable, that's actually calling a function on that particular iterator, and he will then say, oh, I don't really know how to get between different elements of a set, but you guys figure out how to do that. I want to be able to call this function, and you just go ahead and move this iteration pointer to the next element in that container. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to be doing there, and hopefully that's a little bit more clear on how this code was working. And we'd like to kind of maybe go through a little bit more of these examples, because to some extent we're trying to get you to do some stuff on your own, and we want you to start feeling more comfortable with C++. So anyway, let's just jump in and maybe do a couple more parts of this lab with you, if that's okay, just so that you become a little more familiar. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a map of strings to string. So if we look at the syntax here, we're going to have a map where the key is going to be a string and the value is going to be a string. So this is going to be a key value pair that are in this word map. And now I'm just going to go ahead and go through, in our case, we had a vector. Here they're using a list to show you that you could actually iterate through a list with exactly the same syntax as you would with a vector. And then we're going to put so here's the key. We're going to start with a key of being nothing, or an empty string, and the value associated with that will be the first element that we had in our vector. Okay? So let's just see how we would actually throw this into our code, and I think maybe that'll help you feel a little more comfortable with the rest of the lab. So here I am. This is where we left off last time. Here I am with my main. We've just got through printing out everything that was in my set. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that cout print and just let it go to the file for now. And let's do the next piece. We're going to put the vector values into a map. And so here we've got this map, and we want to, let's see if we can figure out what's going on here. Here's our map between a string and a string. Now we've got all of our words in this tokens vector, right? So let's see, I want to iterate through this vector of strings, and I want to start at tokens, token.begin, and not go beyond token.end. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that whatever was in that element of the vector into my word map. And so you'll kind of see, I'm going to start with nothing. Let's see, the first word in First Nephi is I, right? So then I will say word map with an empty string is equal to I. Then I'm going to update last to be I. We go to the next word, it's going to be Nephi. So the word map for I is going to be equal to Nephi. Okay? And if I wanted to, I could then use this same iterator type syntax to print out stuff that's in my map. Okay? So let's see, here we went ahead, we're going to throw things into our map, and now we want to print out the map to a file called filename_map.txt. Okay? So let's see if we can figure out how to do that. Let's start out by just seeing if we can print it out to the screen. That might be a major accomplishment for us. And so let's see, here I've got everything into the map. And now let's go ahead and say we want an iterator that takes a map from a string to a string. Okay, that's the type. And we'll begin at this word map.begin and end at the word map.end. And then we will go ahead and whip through my map, and what we would like to do is go ahead and print it out to a file. Okay, so let's see, what is this iterator going to point at? Turns out that if we look at what a C++ map is, that it is actually a bunch of pairs. Okay, so we get to define what is what our map is, what the key and the value are, and they are just going to be encapsulated in a bunch of pairs. Okay, so the iterator then is going to point at a pair, and if we look at what a pair is, this pair is going to have a first and a second piece to it. Okay? And so these are the elements that we can go ahead and get to inside of our map. So let's go ahead and look at this. If we want to print this thing out, go from the beginning to the end, and then I might want to do something like, let's go ahead and just print it out to start with here. We'd like to print out the let's see, first, and then the IT first, and then the second, and then the IT second. Let's just see if this has any chance of working. And so theoretically, we're going to go through the whole map and then print out what all of these pairs are. Now let's see, what did I get wrong here? I was going to start at the beginning. It doesn't know anything about maps. Okay, so we need to add maps here. Thanks. And apparently typed in something wrong. Tokens, looks like. So we want to go from the beginning to the end of tokens and do stuff. And when I run this now, I will get, okay, here is all of the words that I had in here and in First Nephi. And so you'll notice that if we were to get back to the very beginning, okay, the first was the empty string, then I, and now someplace else there was A and prophet, and notice that we're printing these out in alphabetical order of keys. Okay, Abraham said saying, and we're just going through all the pairs of words that are inside of First Nephi. So you can see that what's really happening is we're now going to be able to learn what word follows the word to in our text. And it's going to be somewhat imperfect the way we've done it so far, because if I had we know that there's a I followed by Nephi, but it got overwritten because somewhere there was an I followed by and. Okay, so we're only going to keep track of the last thing that happened here. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the lab, which is, oh, it wants us to put this out to a file, right? So let's go ahead and do that. You guys know how to do that at this point. We're going to create another OF stream that will be file name underscore map.txt, for example. And I will go ahead and do another cout. What's it want me to do? It wants me to each line output the key, a comma, and a space, and then the value. Okay, forget that. I screwed up. So let's go ahead and output the key, which is the first, then a comma, and then the value. And that will go out to this map file. Okay, so let's go ahead and make that. And now when I run it, it should, notice it created a map file up here. If I take a look at that, then it's going to have again the empty string followed by I, A followed by prophet, and so forth. So these are really good debugging skills. The nice thing about having it in a file is you can search for things and make sure that you feel very comfortable that you're getting the right answers. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how to use maps. And you'll notice here, the thing I really wanted to point out is that this syntax for accessing and printing out a map is exactly the same thing as accessing and printing out a vector, which is exactly the same thing as printing out a set. So these iterators are really important. Let's do one more thing before we quit. They mentioned, let's do something with our map. So let's generate text from this. So we'll start out with an empty string, and then we'll look up that state in my map, figure out what it is, print it out, and then update my state to be whatever the next word was. So we can kind of start to printing out some new text based on what we learned from First Nephi. Okay, so let's just go ahead and throw this in here. Okay, so we'll set our state equal to the empty string. Then we'll grab print out whatever was associated with that empty string, and set our next state equal to whatever was in there. The next time, so if this was, the first is nothing, and the first word was I, then we would print out I here, space. Then we would put I into state. We would look up and see what is associated with I in my word map. Maybe it's Nephi. So the next thing I would put in was Nephi, and we just go ahead and keep generating 100 words of text. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Run this thing, and here's our generated text. And endure to the last day, and thus it is, amen. We got into an infinite loop, and this is really boring. So what you're going to do in the rest of the lab is figure out how to generate text that uses several words of context and can create unique sentences every time you run it. So hopefully that gets you started and get you going in the next step. Again, I really want this to be a lot of fun. So I'm trying to help you along as much as I can.